Hello everyone, how's it going? Vasco here from the Angular University. Welcome! In this lesson we are going to implement the functionality of being able to write one message from one participant to the other. So let's take a look. For example, in this browser window we have here the participant Alice. We could at this stage in the course open a second browser window and select the user Bob. So now what we want to do is we want to be able to write a new message. So send a new message. Whenever we click enter on this input box, we want to send a request to the server. We want to save the message in the in-memory database, and we want to notify the Alice user that a new message is available, load it and display it on the screen. So we want the message to be displayed here at the bottom of the current thread. Now, a very important functionality is if by some reason another user other than Bob, let's say that Chuck sends Alice a message. In that case, we want to keep the thread with Bob here running, but we want to mark this thread here as having unread messages. We want to put here this text in red, and we want to bump the unread messages counter. So let's have a look how can we implement this. First, let's implement the write new message functionality. And the way that we would do this is we go back to our program, and here whenever we type in some text in this area and we click on enter, we are going to trigger here a new store action that it's going to simply be called something like new message available or write new message. So let's implement this first. The first thing that we want to do is we want to go back to our template and we want to detect the key up event of the enter key. So if we click enter, we are going to send a new message. We are going to call a method, which is part of the message section component. We are going to call it on new message, and we are going to pass in a reference to the input text area itself. So the reason why we are passing in the input is because not only we want to extract the current value of the input whenever we click enter, but we also want to reset it to be the empty string. So let's implement here this method. So what we will do is we will call the store. We are going to dispatch a new action that will simply trigger the generation of a new message. Let's create a new action for this. Let's go back to our actions file. We are going to call it send new message. The action class for this is very simple and similar to the other action classes. We are simply going to create a class called send new message. And it's important that we add also the action suffix. So the type is of type send new message. Let's rename this with Shift F6 to send new message action. And the constructor will have a payload which is a string, which is the text of the new message. Now notice that, for example, we don't need to pass in things that are already available in the store, such as, for example, what is the currently selected thread to which this message belongs to. This information is already available in the store. Let's see how we can use this send new message action. We are going to back to our message section component, and we are going to create a new instance of this send new message action class. We're going to pass it in the text that is currently typed in the input box. So the implementation of this method is really as simple as this. Everything else will be taken care of inside the store. In a future lesson, we're going to see how we can add error handling to our application as well. Now, in what will this action result? Are there some changes to the store state that need to be made immediately? In this case, yes, we want to add the new message to the store immediately in an optimistic way. And then we want to do a side effect, which is to send the new message to the server. So let's see how can we implement the first part, which is how to add the new message to the store. As we know, the place to do that is in a reducer. So let's go back to our UI store data reducer and let's add here another case clause. So we're going to say that in the case of send new message action, let's define here a handling method. So what we can see here is an initial implementation of the handle send new message action method. So we take the state, we take the action, and we produce a new store state. In this case, I'm simply creating a clone of the existing state. So now let's implement the logic that adds a new message to the store. So we can see here that the first thing that we would need to implement this is what is the ID of the current thread. And at this point in our reducer chain, we don't have it, we only have the stored data. So how can we solve this? The first thing that we need to do is we need to go back to send new action, and we need to add it here, the current thread ID, to the payload. So in order to make this more readable, let's define here a custom type. We are going to make it an interface, and we're going to call to this custom type send new message action payload. We are going to create here a property which is the text of the message, which is of type string, and we're going to create here another member variable of this custom type, which is the thread ID, which is of type number. And this is the thread to which we want to add a new message. Now we can take this new custom type, and we need to declare the payload as being of type send new message action payload. So if we go back to the message section component, in here what we need to pass in is an object, and the text property is still input.value, but now we need to fill in a thread ID property, which is the value of the current thread, and we don't have that here at this point. So how can we implement this? First, what we're going to do also is, after dispatching the message, we are going to clear the text input. Now, how can we get the current thread ID from the store? Well, at this point we don't have it here stored in a member variable. The simplest would be to simply subscribe to the store, save that in a member variable, and then use it here in the dispatch call. So what would this look like? We are going to use the store, and we are going to subscribe to it. Then whenever we receive a new thread, we are going to save the current thread ID here in a member variable. And now that we have the current thread ID, we can use it here in our dispatch call. Now with the current thread ID available here in the store reducer, so this is part of the payload of the action, we can retrieve the current thread. Let's do so. So we are going to define a variable called current thread, and we are going to the store state, to the threads object. We are going to select the property which has the same thread ID as the one that we received in the action payload. So this is our current thread. What we're going to do here is we are going to add it a new action. For that, what we're going to do here is we're going to add it a new message. So let's simply start by defining here a new message object, which is of type message. Let's see what are the properties that we need to create a valid message object. So this is an example of how TypeScript is helping us to write our program. The first thing that we are going to fill in is the text. So we are going to take it from the action payload. The text is available right here. So the second property that also comes from the payload is the thread ID, right? So we are going to take it also from the payload. Now we need a few more properties to make this new message be a valid message object. One of them is the timestamp. For that we can add the current timestamp. We can create new date, and then from there we are going to get the time, the epoch time. So this leaves two properties. One is the ID, and the other is the participant ID, the current participant ID. Let's see how we can fill in these two new properties in the following lesson. Also, let's see how can we make the message list scroll down automatically so that we can see the last message when we add it to the store. It's coming right up in the next lesson.